Let's move on to some other issues and head north to Queensland. I mentioned this at the top of the show. Adoption could soon become a whole lot easier for the children who have neglectful and abusive parents, but not if those children are Indigenous. Under amendments to the Child Protection Act put forward by the Queensland Government, adoption will now be considered if a child cannot be reunited with their parents after 2 years. Now, this is very similar to the laws that have worked so well in New South Wales. But if the children are Indigenous, adoption will remain a very last resort. And the bill says it's because adoption may infringe upon the unique cultural rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, including connection with families, communities and cultures. Alice Springs Councilor and Director of Indigenous Research at the Centre for Independent Studies, Jacinta Price, joins me now from Alice Springs. Jacinta, I read this announcement of legislation in Queensland. I read it in a very positive way. It's certainly a model that's worked so well that Prue Goward established in New South Wales. But I've got to say, you know, given the statistics with Indigenous kids, why are they outside these positive rule changes and not inside them?
I know. It almost seems like a form of discrimination that instead of upholding a child's human rights, what is being upheld here is this idea of culture. When I read about this today, you know, the Minister, Dee Farmer, for Child Safety, saying that the bill introduced to Parliament today cements adoption as the least preferred option for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children because of cultural connections. I really have to question, what is it that she thinks she knows about Indigenous cultural connections that is far more important to the safety of a child, to the child's human rights? It leaves me absolutely gobsmacked. It's treating Indigenous children as though they are not Australian citizens with the same rights now as children who are Australian citizens, but that just don't happen to have an Indigenous background. I think it's appalling, and I think, you know, the evidence is clear that Indigenous children are far more likely to end up in incarceration, in youth incarceration. They're far more likely to suicide. The evidence is so prevalent that this is the case, and it's fundamentally coming from not having a safe home life. I'm gobsmacked that this is continuing today, that there is effectively segregation going on, and we're dealing with children's lives here.
And of course, of all the other children the bill will capture, beyond the Indigenous children, there could be a range of ethnic backgrounds of those children, but nonetheless, they will go through the adoption system if they can't be reunited with their parents in the best interest of the child. I'm interested to know from you, I mean, is there a capacity if an Indigenous child is put with non-Indigenous family members or parent, in this case, or a new parent or adopted parent, can that adopted parent, if they're not Indigenous, still be able to provide them with cultural connection? You know, can they engage them with family members from their birth family? Can they, I'm not saying that there's classes in culture, but is there a way you can inculcate culture if it's not your culture in order to give the child the best chance in a new home, but keep them connected with their background?
Look, I don't see why that cannot be done. And I know foster carers who go out of their way to ensure that their Indigenous foster child has connection with family, connection with, again, this idea of culture. I want to understand exactly what that means, because are we talking traditional culture? Are we talking a contemporary reinvention of culture that this child is supposedly to be a part of? I know that we've got this wonderful Australian culture that has come together because of, everybody in the entire nation, what we've built together. That's valuable. I see that as valuable as well. And I don't see why that connection cannot take place. But also, why can't we bring up healthy, well-rounded children to become healthy, rounded adults, for them to then, when they've got that opportunity, to understand more about who they are at that stage, once they have, that they've got everything else that children in healthy, loving households have. Like, I don't understand it. To me, we should be upholding the human rights of children regardless of what their culture is or their background.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think it's very sad, as I said, there can be a range of children in foster homes and in care of a lot of different cultures, but only the Aboriginal child is not allowed, if they can't go back to mum and dad, they're not allowed the chance of a new life. And I think that's criminal, to be honest. I think it's criminal. Jacinta Price, as always, thank you very much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me.